bring benefit. So this is one explanation that this is how many of rational choice foreign policy analysis use their logic. But the Kaplan and also Villeron, John Luis Gaddis, many historians, actually very much like Bruce argued that geography or history. So foreign policy is not a matter of choice. So it's something that actually already within us, that who we are in itself is actually determining about what kind of foreign policy that we have. So they are argue that Americans have certain characters, they do have certain experience, they do have certain history and values, and this is actually the one that give them options of policy. So it's not just random thing that you put everything together. Okay, let's take or say burger for today breakfast, and tonight let's get rendang some. No, because you are Indonesian, or let's say I'm Japanese. Okay, so let's say I don't like spicy food. So then actually I will not choose spicy food, for example, or I'm vegetarian, for example, I will not eat rendang. Even like this option actually in front of me. So that's actually, I will not choose, even though I can see scientifically that rendang is actually the best among other food. I will choose tahu isi or seblak or something like that, because yeah, this is just who I am. Okay. So okay. So I just want to give you that there are two ways of explaining foreign policy. Yeah. Okay. We may talk with a lot of this. The second one that when we talk about U.S. foreign policy, there's certain characters, certain maybe geography or history that actually shaping the way they choose their decision. Okay, so now let's focus on the Cold War, the term, the word of Cold War. Okay, Ega, what is your favorite AI tools you have? Yeah, what kind of AI tools you use usually? ChatGPT, okay. Any others? Najma. Sama. Oh, Sama. Okay, Sama. Okay, okay, Sama. So, any tools you use usually? Or, huh? You are the best. Okay, now I want each one of you, just okay, in the next few minutes, okay, open your favorite AI tools and ask one questions that you think important, or do you think is actually what you call it, is interesting, or just with the word Cold War. So what kind of questions you think is important for you to know, or for your friends or the class know? Yeah, ask your tools and let's see what they answer. Okay, just one question. Yeah. Salma. Okay. Salma. Yes. Or anyone that never use AI? Really? Oh. Okay. You can use there's Meta also, right? You can use your WhatsApp. Just you don't. Okay. Use your handphone. Yeah. There's Meta AI or maybe on the ChatGPT. You can revise your question if you think, oh, I don't think this is a good question, maybe you want to revise question, but in the next 2 minutes, I will ask, okay, you to share what question you ask, and you will also share about what your AI tell you about. Yeah. Okay. This is how you work on your assignment, right? prefer to use English or Bahasa Indonesia? You are doing
Both.
oh, both.
It's English? No, no, no.
Sometimes
It's an
we type
accent.
it in Indonesia, but
Maybe
in
Bahasa
English.
Nggak
Like,
kayak gitu.
oh my God, I asked in Indonesia, so please. Because I know that something that I asked is hard to understand, right?
So what?
Actually, it's about corruption why still happening.
Oh no, I mean just thinking about your
I use ChatGPT.
ChatGPT. Okay, okay then. So let's start with Karen then. Okay. So what question you ask? Okay.
About why the corruption still exists in here.
Okay, so but I'm asking you to about Cold War.
sorry.
Okay. Okay, okay. So
I asked her, is it about Cold War? That's what she said.
is this a bad AI?
It's bad.
Okay, no, wait.
Jody.
Eh,
Jody.
huh?
Jody.
Jody, yeah, Jody, okay. Jody, did you, okay? What question you ask?
I'm asking about the Cold War, the history of Cold War.
So you asked about, okay, maybe can you make it in the sentence, Rashid? You asked about what, the history or?
The history. So, the AI said that Cold War was a rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union that
Okay.
began after World War II. It was characterized by political, economic, and propaganda conflict with limited direct military confrontation between the two superpowers.
Choose what option. Okay. Okay. Do you think it's a correct information, or do you think that it's not complete? Or?
I think it's not complete enough because
Yeah.
my question is not to be specific
Okay.
regarding the Cold War.
Okay, so maybe you need to subscribe. Ini gratis. Okay. Anyone want to share what question you asked? What answer you get? Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So I use ChatGPT
Yes. Okay.
and I asked them with an Indo language. Anggap saya nggak tahu what word.
Okay,
jelaskan.
good.
So the answer would be in Indonesia, but I tried to explain it and elaborate it in English. So basically, Cold War or Perang Dingin is a conflict between two great nations. In the World War II, it is in the U.S. and the USSR, Soviet Union. So why it's called Dingin, Perang Dingin? Basically, they are not really born into a specific way in the military, but it is about the impact. For instance, like who's the strongest military? The nuclears, like when the US making the nuclear and the USSR making the, for instance, the two nuclears. So basically, it's not really about the war, but it's about the Cold War, the behind of it.
So this is how Cold War is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dave.
More or
Okay.
less.
Anything to add? You want to add something?
I think that's the basis
Of the Cold War. So you are asking about what Cold War is, yeah? Okay. So but Jody actually already kind of try beyond that about the history, kind of maybe asking about what makes what's it, the factors of Cold War, yeah? How about Naina? Our design. So we come a bit a lot of these pictures, visuals, and going to the Instagram. But I don't know, so just out of the topics, you use also the kind of AI that the one that for visual image apa biasanya yang pakai? No, so you don't believe that. Usually the artists never believe AI. Okay, then. Okay.
Because jadi I follow ask the AI what is like posted about what is happening,
Yes,
what is
yes.
Cold War about. I asked what like interesting thing that happened in the Cold War.
Okay, so what's again? You asked about.
I asked what is like the interesting event that happened in the Cold War.
Okay,
And
good.
I used Perplexity,
Okay.
and there's a bunch of it. They say there's the Berlin Algorithm. Berlin Wall, the office, and includes us evening surprises, the Berlin Wall, espionage, spy pieces, proximals, and configuration, space test, sensing of control,
Okay.
four of the Berlin Wall, and understanding. So it should be some example
Interesting on how you ask the interesting things. Yeah. Do you think it's interesting? Does it answer? Not so much. Okay. Okay. Anyone want to share? Maybe one more. Okay. So we're gonna have two.
So I asked Black Box AI, same with Salwa. So I asked if you're a student, what do you want to learn in the future? So it said that if I were a student, I want to learn about events and missile phones, which is the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. And then the culture impact, and then global perspectives and technological advancements, which is learning about the technological race, including the space race and advancements in military technology, end of the Cold War, analyzing the factors that led to the end of the Cold War, and legacy and lessons.
Oh, okay. I use Cloudly. I just found that application from my friend. I like the UI. So I changed from Sensitivity to this Cloudly, and actually I have two questions. The first question is, does the Cold War have a direct impact to Indonesia? Because yeah, I'm just curious about that, and then suddenly I just remembered about, well, Indonesia is non-aligned movement, right? And then I just remembered that, oh my god, I already learned about that, so it's a kind of plain question. And then I just could only think about what I can see in the front, the Cold War as history and theory, and I really want to know about what are the difference between these two things about understanding the Cold War. So this AI tell me that to see the Cold War as history is just like seeing the Cold War and anything that happening at the time. So it's like chronological things that happen when the Cold War is going. But if we talk it as a theory, we can like analyze about something that can be more about just an activity, like not about just Cuban missiles. In the theory, we can also why there's Cuban missiles happening, and then maybe like is it gonna threatening the other country also? Yeah, basically like that.
Thank you, Jima. So, yeah, you're helping me to the next slide. Sorry. But okay, so before go on that answer, so there's things that I want to add on that. But just want to comment on the way you are using tools. So I think very interesting on how you are said asking different, and the way you are asking is different. So I think that's maybe that will be the future skills that we need to have. So rather than skill of answering, so you will be more because the information is there. So it's different with my maybe my time of Cory that we okay. So we memorize books because this is the one that we're being asked because that's the materials in the textbook or any handout or something. So we memorize that because that's will the one will go or said will need to be answered in the test. Yeah. But now information is everywhere. So that's may remind us with very actually classical or traditional those intellectual skills, actually asking questions. So that's the way you are asked questions actually will kind of differentiate whether you maybe intelligence or you are not so much aware about that issue. So, but just one thing we will I said things that okay I understand how like April mentioning that okay was it if I want to as a student or was it, if what need to know about so you start with the question if like I'm a student or something like that? Yeah? Oh.
Imagine that.
Oh, I don't know.
I have
Okay.
zero
Yes,
education
yes.
about
Okay, good,
Portugal.
good. Yeah. So that's the context. So I felt asking about, oh, I mentioned that I don't know anything about Cold War, what kind of information that I need. But Naira is asking very kind of different questions because saying that, so what interesting things. So this actually helped her to understand Cold War. But Esther will asking different in terms of how, so if I'm a student, what things that I need to know. The same thing here. I also actually I use some of the tools and put the context in terms of before talk about Kaplan, Robert Kaplan, and now I'm talking a lot using the reference from John Lewis Gaddis. So I will ask, okay, I'm a John Lewis Gaddis. I want to explain to my students about Cold War. So what things that I need to tell them, something like that. So this is kind of setting up a context because yeah, if I ask the same questions like what's it, April maybe okay, so everyone maybe not interested because oh I know that already. So yeah, this is the things that maybe we need to harness the skill on that. And next week, again, yeah, it's kind of reminder. So we will have no class on Wednesday, yeah. So then, but you need to join the there's a sharing session on Monday, and this is very much related to the using AI for your learning as a students. What extent that should actually improve your literacy and that. Okay, back to I want to pick up Naira and Jemima actually about the theory and history. So, as a social scientist or in IR, we mostly focus on the theory. So we want to explain things in terms of oh this is happening. What is actually the kind of general laws? What is the pattern? Something like that, right? But history is just like Naira questions. What things that interesting? Maybe the interesting is the way I don't know. They forgot to put what's it? The combinations of nuclear war or something like that. They forget so. And in this semester, we maybe a bit step outside our comfort zone as a IR. We rather than just stop at the general understanding. Oh, Cold War is this, and that stuff, or this theory explained about Cold War. So we will go more on some of the details. So and when we go on the details, in one way there's a limitation, but the other way is also that we are not put ourselves that we need to make that explain everything because like historian they interest more on the what happened in that particular moment, how the leaders decide things. Maybe this actually difference from previous presidents. So this is how we will use a lot of more like borrowing historical approach to understand foreign policy. So of course this the one that we are using history is connected with strategy. So if we just use history what's it, business as usual. This is like Jemima mentioned. So we just learn dates, names, what happened, the chronology, right? So, but we are not using history on that. So we are using history to understand the way they are deciding. So these leaders deciding on their policy. So foreign policy is not emerged in a vacuum. It emerged through a decision made under pressure. So then this is the one that differentiates. Kennedy have different pressure at his time. Nixon's have different time, different conditions. Roosevelt has different conditions. History actually put that as something unique, need to be considered and not just gloss off. Oh, because this is too unique to them, so we just ignore. We just focus on the big thing that everything's applied. So we try to understand on that what ideas, interests, institutions. So then even like how they read history actually. So how Roosevelt actually see Russia or Stalin is actually, the history of Soviet Union also is actually influencing on how he decide. Yeah. So basically, we are in this case in our U.S. foreign policy. Yes, the big question actually before to 1939, U.S. is a relatively isolationist countries. They are reluctant to join the World War One, and they joined World War Two quite late. Yeah. Okay. So and this is why they move from these traditions to that they become expansive, rise to global, become more globalist in their approach. And this is not something new. So according to Walter Russell Mead, there is a kind of foreign policy traditions that each presidency actually combining one or two or something like that. And this is also the pendulums go from one tradition to another tradition. The first traditions from Hamilton or from John Hamilton. So he was the treasury, I forget presidency, but the Alexander Hamilton, sorry, not John Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton's. So he's focused on using foreign policy for economic purpose, creating more welfare to America, to the state, to the nations, and maintaining global orders for the benefits of economy. So they want to create peace or something like that, but for very much focus on the economy. Jeffersonians, this is I don't know, you're familiar with Agim, okay, some of you. So, like Muslims, they have what you call it, a speaker, they're emphasizing that, okay, to be a good person, just focus on yourself, cleanse your heart, focus on your family, and from that you can actually influence people. So I think maybe in other traditions very similar, right? So you don't go out there telling people what to do, this and that, or something, but focus on yourself. And so this is how Jeffersonian said. This is very much the way Jefferson's from Virginia, and you can remember this Appalachian Mountains. Jefferson, the founding father, said very much embody the spirit of yeoman farmers at the time, that we self-reliant, we rely on ourselves, we don't rely on ourselves, but we emphasize on freedom, liberty, so creating a good thing at home, that's actually will influence others to do good too. So you don't need to force others to make good, create democracy, create protecting human rights at home. So this is how Jeffersonian think. Jacksonians. Okay, so this is according to Kaplan, actually majorly U.S. Americans is kind of very much Jacksonians. So it's from Andrew Jackson's. So it's kind of populist, nationalism, honor. So if you meet Americans, actually they are quite mostly like, even like you travel around, hopefully someday, yeah. So I drove around in US, so you just go stop in a restaurant. People will very much friendly. They will greet you, morning, okay, how do you do, something like that. So this is how they are quite friendly. But it's different. Kaplan differentiate that there is a friendly and hospitable. So if you are going to Kupang next week, yeah, go there. I'm sure that maybe people in the village will ask me, so stay with us. Stay at our home, and we'll bring our food, something like that. So this is how Indonesians friendly is. But Americans not like that. So they are friendly. They will greet you in the elevator, in the street, something like that. But they will not bring stranger to their home. So not just asking, okay, Bruce, you're from Indonesia, okay, just come to our house now. So they will give, okay, anything that I can help you, showing you post office, bus station, or something like that. But they never, so they kind of have separation on privacy, but quite friendly. So Jacksonians is something like that. So they very much friendly people, like this simple people. But once actually you hurt them, you make them suffer, or you hurt their feelings. So they will say that if you're okay, so I will retaliate. Even wherever you are, I will chase you till to accept this accept my revenge, big events. So just like, yeah, remember during the terrorism. Okay, so Bush actually very much represent this kind of sentiments that Americans are very much, they are friendly. They don't want to mingle with other people business. But once actually you okay, attack them or hurt their feelings, they will retaliate, or even more actually. It's not just so. This is kind of the mentality of Jackson. So they are very militaristic traditions. Wilsonians, you heard about. This is the one that give inspirations for liberal traditions in IR. Creating democracy, institutions, free trade. So those values that believe that if you create those, we will have a world peace. And all presidents actually, and all people also choosing their presidents from this extreme to another, or going back from Obama to Trump and go back to Biden. So this is also the elections also showing that. But according to me, that these traditions exist in the discussion of US foreign policy. So you may want to, if how Trump actually, so you may want to use this apology to help you to understand these different tendencies. So there's contradictions, ambiguity, but this is how scholars understand. Questions or comments? Okay. So in terms of the, was it, so 1919 to 1947, so the, before World War II, US very much isolationism. So they actually, Wilson at that time proposed to the world that we need to make a League of Nations institutions that will maintain world peace. But the peace resulted from the World War One. Actually, peace that started war. So then, actually, later on during World War II, Roosevelt doesn't want to repeat the same thing. So he wants to create peace that stop the war, basically. So this idea. So we will elaborate more later on what's the difference League of Nations with the United Nations. So there's Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Is the president during this economic crisis. And then there's Truman Doctrine. That's the third of containment strategy. So why did US abandon isolation? Anyone ask about that? Okay. So, the detail of Bush, George Kennan's, there's one of the articles available on the library. We will go on that. So this is how US at that time, after winning the World War II, even like it is quite late, they know that they are with the Soviet Union, okay, so as the survivor of the war. So experiencing difficult decision means that whether we go back to our home, to the country road, okay, just let the world deal with that, or actually stay in Europe. So World War II actually changing the mindset or the understanding of Americans about the world. That they understand that starting seeing that there's an interdependence between their interests with the global interests. So the industries will not be developed, prospers, or if the well-being, the economic well-being of the world is not well. So I mean, like Bruce are selling laptop or something, but in his village, everyone's poor, struggling for food, eat or something like that. So nobody will buy Bruce laptop, right? So Bruce need to help them to become a little bit forget about so they fulfill their stomach, send their kids to school, to Jakarta, to other places, to go to college. Then they will start thinking that, oh, maybe I will need to buy this laptop because my son is going to university, and then they need laptop. Right? So this is a global interdependence, meaning that in one economy of US is tied to the economic well-being of the world, but also at the same time the security of the US is tied to the security of the world. Prior to Pearl Harbor, they think that they are in a safe house or safe place, yeah? So no one able to attack US because you do have those big oceans ways on the west and the east. No one can be able to attack you. But Japan actually changed that Pearl Harbors actually radically changed that we are not safe actually. So if we just let others country, Europe in war, conflict, so sooner or later actually those threats is coming to our house. So we need to stop those threats before they're coming to our fence. So this is the idea that our security, our safety now actually tied to the safety, security of the world. So economic incentive for recovery, so I mentioned that actually Japan, particularly Germany, they are the center of industry. So if these places is not rebuilt, they will fall to communism, they will fall in maybe poverty or terrorism or radicalism. So you need to maintain this center of industry because this is the center of the global economy. And yeah, so the other thing about besides those pragmatic reasons, so remember, yeah, US is quite idealistic, right? So that we want to create our own measurement, we want to create our own food. So as we are free, we are liberty. So they do have an idealistic commitment that yeah, we actually the heroes. So we are the one that also the world are asking help for. So yeah, so like Batman. So who will if there's fire, who will ask for? You can ask Batman also. Yeah. So then this is actually how. Back to the tradition. So the idea of the containment initially start as this very limited understanding. At that time, Soviet Unions and US are very much equal, but on different level. Meaning that from conventional military speaking, Soviet Unions are more powerful. So if they go face to face in Europe, Soviet Union is actually more have potential to defeat US. But US at the same time, what they do, what they have at that time, they have the nuclear bomb at the before. They don't have the numbers of military personnel as Red Army has. So at that time, the idea of to contain the influence of Soviet Unions are taken very much focus on certain aspect only. So because they don't have the capability to confront Soviet in all fronts in the beginning. But then it's also changing when Eisenhower later on with more capability on the nuclear and hydrogen bomb. He relies on more on the nuclear to having kind of competitions with the Soviet Unions to get deterrence. So rather than put your or set forces face to face, you just let Soviet know that if you attack us, we know we can attack you back separately. So this is how Eisenhower tried to contain the influence of Soviet power through more reliance on atomic bomb. But during Kennedy is changing also. In the Kennedy times, U.S. feel that their capability is already kind of equal with Soviet Union, meaning that this they call it strategic or set containment, that if Soviet actually put their troops in one country, we can send our troops in the same number. If the Soviet Union send their nuclear missile, we can send the same nuclear missile. If Soviet Unions want to fight or debate in diplomacy, we will also face them in diplomacy. So different presidents have different strategy. This is the things that we will further collaborate in the next day. Okay. So this from very limited political strategy to a global militarized posture. So when you see that how U.S. actually tried to prevent communism in Southeast Asia, from Vietnam War, in Middle East, in other places, that's not something that's starting from the World War II. It actually evolved through actually relate also the capability and the threat that Soviet Union has. So the strategy was not monolithic. So in the upcoming 2 or 3 weeks, we will talk a lot about containment. So we can start reading about that. So each administration's adapted to their worldview. Truman's are actually accident president. So when the World War II ends, the vision of Roosevelt that creating a certain type of world actually being kind of cancelled because he died suddenly. So Truman as the vice president become the president, but he is actually initially being doubted, but then later on is one of the main influential leaders during the Cold War. Truman. And Eisenhower is former general. So contrary to our understanding that military persons will use more military approach to deal with their strategy, Eisenhower is very much different because he knew what war likes. So I mean that how war actually very bad to, it's a bad thing to have war. Seeing people killed, seeing your soldier killed, coming home in a coffin. So this is the things that Eisenhower, as a former general, understand clearly. So he, rather than using the conventional strategy to face Soviet Union face to face, so he used the leverage in terms of the nuclear weapons, so to reduce the direct confrontations with the Red Army. So this is just different ways of. Okay. So this is the one that I want you to keep in mind when you are doing the summary or review. So when we talk about strategy in the Cold War, just like Jody mentioned, so this is the conflict between these superpower. Okay. So this is not only about military. So containment or Cold War is actually competitions in all fronts. So this is also the decision is combining from military strength, economic development, alliances, and ideological patience. So military, they develop starting with more reliance on nuclear and later on more on the conventional military. Economic development, you will learn about Marshall Plan. This is the first kind of foreign aid, it's called, let's say, in the modern time, that why US giving 13 billion US dollars to Europe at that time for free, quote unquote, yeah. So, but actually it's not for free. because just like mentions using the analogy or example of Bruce actually giving scholarship to his neighbors. So then his neighbors will buy his laptop, something like that. And also at the same time, so okay, maybe Bruce also can influence certain things in terms of, let's say, okay, so if you are, because I give you a scholarship, okay, don't join this organization, don't join this radical organization, so you can influence it. So this is also the thing that if what's it? Bruce neighbors actually starving, coming to campus. No, there's no food to eat. Always have difficulties living. So maybe someone approach him or her, and then I have your solution for you. Let's do something. So hungry persons or hungry nations or economically or say ruined countries prone to the influence of communism in that case. Yeah. So the economic development is part of the strategy of Dayton. So alliance, things that I mentioned lastly, that U.S. is not only rely on itself, but actually creating organizations, creating cooperation that enable other countries feel that U.S. power is not threat for them. So they become, okay, I can see that US is more friendly compared to if I'm joining Soviet or something. So this is the one of the keys of global powers, that you not only need to show that you are strong to ask other people do what they want, but actually how to make them feel that they are doing what they want, but actually is in line with the one that you want. So that's we call it about soft power, alliance, great organizations, and lastly ideological patience. So Keenan actually believe Soviet Union is very strong, but ideology speaking actually weak. Communism is weak, and actually if we just wait, they will fall by themselves. So this is the ideas of Bacon. So rather than directly confront, fight with Soviet, because they know that we just wait, just like for example, like anyone go to watch MMA, UFC, or something? Okay. So I mean that you can fight this. It's like Muhammad Ali, if you see boxing, so you just hit and then just hit and hit. Just because we know that, let's say I fight with Bruce. Bruce actually have a problem with, I know that Bruce have problem with his heart, for example. So actually I just defend myself, just give a little bit punch a bit, and just wait for a couple of rounds. Bruce actually will, yeah, KO by himself. So this is how American thinks about the ideology of communism, because they know that this ideology have a flaw, that actually if you just maintain your defense, you don't need to attack them, they will fall by themselves. So this is the idea. Okay. So, okay, what do you think? So, if okay, some of the answer you already have before in terms of Cold War. So to what extent that you think Cold War, learning Cold War is still relevant for understanding US foreign policy in particular, or understanding the world in general? Julita, if I'm asking this question to you, what any things that we may learn from Cold War that can inform us about current situations? What kind of legacy?
About the emergence as a impulse.
Okay. Elaborate more.
Okay. The Soviet of the Union's collapse in 1991, the US became the world's superpower, enabling it to exert unparalleled influence over global institutions, norms, and politics. This unipolarity allowed the US to shape international law, promote values, and interface militarily around the world. And something
a lot of this, back if we just maybe, if I understand correctly, a lot of these institutions, so yeah, okay. So a lot of these institutions created during the beginning of the, or during the Cold War, and so you can see that there is to understand the reasoning, the kind of why that exists and how that actually serve U.S. interests. So that's actually there are a lot of explanations to understand, like not only U.S. in itself, but actually a lot of those global order that we are seeing right now at least, yeah. And the other things also, yeah, maybe we're also questioning that why during those becoming sole superpower, no one actually won or willing to challenge at that time. Now there's some challenge, but so that's also one of the questions that very much lies into the process of war. Anything else that maybe you want? Maybe, yeah.
We know that the Cold War is a very important momentum in history, especially when we're talking about the international relation and foreign policy. Well, what kind of the legacy of the Cold War foreign policy? Because I think one of the legacy is the shifting the power from the hard power into the soft power. Why? Because we know that during the Cold War, the competition between the United States and the USSR was not only talking about the military equipments, the economic development alliances and kind of hard power, but also the United States trying to build a new power, especially in the soft power. That's why I said before that a lot of things developed during the Cold War, especially when we talk about the diplomacy, public diplomacy, the music diplomacy, pop and jazz, and then in the USSR also see the importance of public diplomacy during the Cold War itself.
So just a quick notes on that. So in the beginning, maybe we can still feel now that how actually, what do you think actually Europeans perceive American culture? So they relatively see Americans as uncultured, right? Okay, so you can imagine that you are the winner of the war, but the one who are you conquered kind of relatively culturally superiors on that. So now you are competing with Soviet, with their there's a Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Tchaikovsky, those classical. So compared to Americans say, oh, country road or country music or something, Bob Dylan. So yeah, okay. So they are actually not only facing this big military challenge from Soviet Unions, but this is actually cultural giants. So this is actually starting with a lot of, they call it music diplomacy, bringing up jazz to compete with classical, emphasizing that, okay, so maybe Europe with those ballerina, those classical music is sound very traditional with all those high cultures, but US kind of challenge that this is the new era of freedoms, new of expressions, new. So this is there's also cultural peril during the Cold War. So anyone want to add? Oh yeah,
For the legacy of Cold foreign policy, maybe first about the rising of multipolar country and superpower, not only US, because maybe in the legacy of Cold War, maybe in the Cold War it's just US and also it's just USSR in compete, but in nowadays we can see that because of the Cold War, the principle of not directly attack another countries in the battlefield, So they are built their economic and also strengthen their military and so on. We can see that rising country like China and also India and so on. And they are so also their approach is similar with the Cold War. It's they are avoid for the directly attack in the battlefield, but they are compete in the economic fields and also and its influence for the second legacy of Cold War. Security dilemma will continue to exist until nowadays because there are so many
Explain security dilemma.
yes, security dilemma because every day arising of the superpower countries and also I take the example in the South China Sea
Yes.
because arising superpower like China, even though that the South China Sea is protected by UNCLOS, but the impact country like Malaysia and Philippines, they are also facing a security dilemma by the nine dash line acknowledged from the China. Because of why security dilemma is still exists because they are just nine dash line from China is not just usual thing, but it's a threat because they are superpower countries and they can also threaten these countries because their power is too higher and too strong to that. So I think the security dilemma will be.
Okay, okay. So hopefully we will get more some kind of lesson when we go through history, understanding those incidents, interesting events, as like Naira mentions, and we will take a look on that, what kind of pressure that those leaders have, what kind of conditions, what kind of options, why they decide this rather than that. So this is the things that we will also elaborate. Yeah. So the last thanks for the reflection. So, okay, so again, back to history. Again, the history that we are using in just formulas is not just memorizing stuff. Yeah, of course, that's also important about the date of the presidency, so you're not taking wrong conclusions because you don't know who come first or something. So by understanding some of the basic facts actually help you to understand better in the situations. But history here is actually related to the strategy that if we just see Cold War, U.S. foreign policy as this is what happened, and then this who did that, something like that. So we just actually kind of become chronic, as John Lewis studies. But yeah, if you are strategists, you are promoting around some of you sit in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs desk, giving advice to the minister, or maybe you are the minister, him or herself. So you're giving strategy, you create strategy, but you don't understand history. Actually, you kind of just like throwing dice. Because of course, history is not revealing, but a lot of things that actually somehow influence, or even I mean, it's that the way we are understanding history, if we cannot step back a bit, we may not be reflective toward our decision. We think that, oh, I choose A because A is better than B. But actually, maybe because I born in this place, I came out from this family, this is the one that made me choose A. So this is understanding history, our own history actually will make us more reflective because then we can, oh, let's stop for a bit, why I decide this. Maybe there's something that force me or tell me to do the same thing. Okay, so without understand, just because the narratives, actually this is the thing why George Bush Senior said willing to said go to the second Gulf War because he used and he managed to mobilize other countries when Iraq Saddam Hussein attacked Kuwait. He used the term as a Munich or said what you call it so incident. So during the Munich prior to World War II happened. So that Prime Minister of England's Chamberlain actually meet Hitler, and then he knows that Hitler is very powerful, very ambitious, and he says that okay, Hitler just want to get Poland, let's give him Poland, and then we can hope that he will stop his expansions, right? But that's not happening. Actually, Hitler's actually asked for more. So in Indonesia we call it dikasih apa? Hati. Okay, so that's the thing. So and this what's it? History actually stick with George Bush senior, so that even he seeing Saddam Hussein is thinking that if I give Saddam Hussein just like what Chamberlain gave to Hitler, Saddam Hussein actually will control or expand. So it can be true or not true, but we can understand in terms of his decisions through the way he interpret history. So George Bush studied history just like this Munich incidents that create a World War II. So this is the things that he wants to avoid. So that's why he directly mobilized coalitions in UN to stop Saddam Hussein and keep Saddam Hussein out from Kuwait. Can be different story. He chose differently, but how we understand history actually inform the way why we decide this. So that's all for today, and see you next. I don't know. Oh, so next week Friday we'll do online, yeah. So I'll send the link to you. So next on Wednesday you join the join the seminar. We're working on your summary one, and on Friday we do online, and we'll share about your summary. We will discuss on the first part of the summary. Thank you and have a good weekend, everyone. Yeah.